If you want your game in Pico-8 to actually respond to the user, then you're going to need to use some buttons. And Pico-8 has 6 buttons that a player can interact with. Basically, you have direction buttons, you have an up, a down, a left, and a right. And then there are 2 additional buttons which, for player 1 at least, are mapped to Z and to X on the keyboard. Now you can do anything you want with these particular buttons. They're not set for anything specific, but in general, of course, you'd use the arrow keys for directions and Z and X for some sort of interaction that the player might want to do. But Pico-8 doesn't really care about what you want to do with the buttons. It numbers them arbitrarily 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these buttons can be accessed by calling a command in Pico-8, a function called btn. And btn has one argument, the bit in the brackets, which is the button number you're after. And it returns 2 results. It either returns true, in other words, the button's been pressed, or false, the button hasn't been pressed. And if you wrap btn in an if statement, in other words, if you say if the button has been pressed, then do something, then it's very easy for you to see that if you ask it, has button 0 been pressed, effectively you're asking, am I moving left? If button X has been pressed, am I firing a gun, or am I doing an action? So this is the basic idea behind the way that Pico-8 interacts with its buttons. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a little bit of code that you can put together so that you can actually test out how this works. So in this particular example here, I've already got the 2 functions in place, update and draw. Remember, update is where everything happens, draw is where you draw it, and you keep them as separate as possible. And what I'm going to do, very straightforward, is I'm going to program a circle moving on the screen. So to start with, because this program is going to move something around, I can't just draw the circle in one place on the screen. It has to be in different locations. And so that means it needs variables. And because I'm a boring sort of guy, I'm just going to use X for the X-axis location and Y for the Y-axis location. So it really is that simple. And I'm just going to draw a circle. I'm going to clear the screen first. I'm going to draw a circle wherever X and Y are located. So circ fill X, Y, I'll give it a radius of say 4 and a color of 8. So if I escape and run, there's my circle sitting in the middle of the screen. Sitting in the middle of the screen because I gave it the location 63, 63. To move this, remember this is an action now, so I'm putting it into update. To move it, it's very simple. Remembering what we said before, I just simply put if button 0, then X equals X minus 1, end. So button 0 is left, if you remember. The X-axis runs across the computer from 0 to 128. So if we look at what we've got, if you imagine the Pico-8 screen like this, the top left corner up here, 0, 0, and the bottom right corner, 127, 127. That means if we think about the X-axis for a second, running along here, the largest X value over on this side is 127, and the smallest is 0. So our object, which might be on the screen located, say here, has an X value there. And if we press our left button, so we're pressing the left arrow button, which is button 0. If we press button 0, then X is going to move this way. In other words, it's going to get less. It's going to go from a high number to a small one. And the same works for all the other arrows. So if I press button 3 down here, we're going to drag it down this way, which means that the Y value, remembering that Y is going to do the same thing, it's going to run from 0 to 127. If I press button 3, we're going to move the Y this way. In other words, we're going to increase the value of y. So this gives us an indication of what we need to do whenever we press one of the particular buttons. So if we go back to the code a second, we can see this in action. I have moved the value of x down by 1 if I press the left button. And similarly, if I just copy this and paste it in, if I press button 1, which was our right hand button, I'm going to move the object to the right. So if I run it now and press one button, I move left, press the other button, I move right. Similarly, if I want to make the thing move up and down, I'm going to need to interact with buttons 2 and 3, and I'm going to have to change it to change the y-axis. If I press 2, I'm moving up, so the y is going less because 0 is near the top, and if I press 3, I increase the value of y. So if I press escape, type run again, I now have an object that moves around the screen. If you're disappointed with how fast that's moving, because it is quite frankly very slow, this is the value that's changing that. And what I could do is I could change that value completely to a variable, let's call it speed, and set the variable to say 3, and change all of these to represent speed, and then I can run it. That moves quickly, and all I have to do is change one variable. So if I put it to 1 again, it'll be slow, very tedious, very slow, whereas if I put it to 10, it will be ludicrously fast. In fact, I've lost my blob because it was too quick. So that's a very basic update on how to move an object around the screen using the arrow keys. Happy programming.